their day in court and not seeing judicial, like, legal action. However, we still are true in believing that it is the breadcrumb to the larger dinner. And so we are hopeful that this investigation now starts to open up that further probe into the sexual assault allegations, into the child trafficking. So it still is a win.
And what do you make of the words of His Majesty the King, that he reads with great concern of the arrest of Andrew, but he wants the law to be followed?
I will continue to commend the King for the actions that he's taken. We have yet to see that from our own government here. You know, we were just at the Pam Bondi hearing. And so I think to hear the King come out and acknowledge the fact that there needs to be an investigation, the law should be followed, like it should be followed for anybody that should be held to this type of investigation. And if it is found that he indeed did share secret information from his own government, I mean, that's a crime that's punishable by life. We would ask that he holds him to the highest extent of the law, even though it is his brother. So I commend the King. I say thank you to the King and to the royal family for standing behind survivors, but also just standing behind their people to say, it doesn't matter your wealth or your power. You don't have a different set of laws for you that don't apply to other people. And I think we're seeing that in the UK right now.
And you can watch that full interview with Sky and Amanda Roberts and lots of analysis on Newsnight. That's on BBC Two, iPlayer, and also here on the news channel at 22:30 GMT. Well, let's speak now to Victoria Howard, who is editor of The Crown Chronicles, which looks at royal history and indeed at the present-day royals. Victoria, thank you very much for joining us on the programme today. And I think let's begin with a reflection on how historic this moment is, the arrest of the brother of the King.
There are no words. You know, this is just a huge, huge moment. Particularly for modern royals. If you do go back over the centuries, there are a couple of examples of people close to the royal family or the King and Queen being arrested. So 1685 and the Duke of Monmouth, he was arrested for raising a rebellion to try and take the throne back. So very different circumstances. But I just don't think that the seriousness of today can be understated at all. It's, of course, in relation to charges or allegations for misconduct in public office and not, as some of that reporting said, in relation to any allegations of sexual wrongdoing. But this is the beginning of quite a story, I think, for the royal family. And that statement today as well from the King, it's just something we weren't expecting, to say the law should be followed. I'm completely behind authorities doing their job properly. My brother will get no special treatment. That's effectively the King distancing himself as much as he can from Andrew and his behaviour.
And of course, it was interesting, wasn't it, that we learned earlier today that the King had not been informed in advance that this arrest was going to happen. Again, the importance of the appearance of him being treated, the former Prince Andrew, and indeed the King, in the way anyone else would be treated in relation to an impending arrest.
Exactly, and that's one thing that we should be holding public figures accountable to. There are a set of principles called the Nolan Principles, and they are supposed to govern the conduct of people in public life, so our politicians as well as our royal family. And I think the statement and the entire process speaks to particularly that transparency and the accountability, that things will be followed, processes will govern this entire situation as they should be. And of course, the King saying, my brother will be equally treated under that law. And again, the interesting thing is that the law is executed in the King's name. So if anything ever did go to trial, it would be the Crown, i.e. King Charles III versus Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Completely unusual, and I think just a really, in the abstract, of course, taking away from the seriousness of the situation, a very interesting moment in our political and royal history.
And it's a very delicate and obviously a very difficult moment for the royal family. Clearly, given that the former Prince Andrew is being questioned by police at the moment. There is a limit on what they would say or could say, but how do you think they will handle this going forward? We've seen both the King and Queen out at engagements today trying to carry on with normal duties. But do you think ultimately more questions may be asked of the King, of other senior royals about what they knew?
I think so, and I think the public will want to know that too. I think what has been interesting about, particularly today and the last few weeks in relation to the Andrew story and the Epstein files, is that the palace has slightly shifted its communications. It has been slightly more proactive than we would normally expect. You know, the royal mantra has often been never complain, never explain, but of course that doesn't really work in today's world, in the world of 24-hour news, of social media, and also expecting more from our public figures, our government, our monarchy. So that proactive statement today, huge news. But I think they will, in terms of their engagements, they will keep carrying on. They will do everything that has been planned, because the royals plan things, a year in advance. These things take a lot of time to organise. So they will not want to let those charities and organisations down. They will continue those engagements. But I think we're going to expect to see a lot more of those shouting and heckling in public, because people rightly want to know what is going on and what they knew beforehand.
OK, Victoria, thank you very much for joining us. Victoria Howard, editor of The Crown Chronicles. So what does all this mean? Misconduct in public office is a complicated offence. It essentially boils down to an allegation that someone who was doing a job on behalf of the British public did something seriously wrong, knowing it to be wrong. The royal historian, Dr. Tessa Dunlop, explained more about how it relates to the case of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor.
I think there was a certain inevitability once leaking into the public domain in the latest tranche of Epstein files. There was this clear abuse of power vis-a-vis misconduct in a public office. Although it should be said, it's actually quite hard to get a conviction. It's not just about wrongdoing. There's two possible counts on which you can be convicted. I think on the one hand, they need to be able to demonstrate, the prosecutors, that the individual in question was feeding somebody else information from that he shouldn't have been, for that the recipient, i.e. Epstein's, financial gain, and or that the person doing that, in this case potentially Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, was himself potentially also profiting from that, i.e. that there's an element of corruption. So on those two counts, you need to be able to fulfill either one of them. The sadness on many levels for me, and the inevitability almost, is that his conviction has come not because of the extraordinary survivors, the victims, who have so bravely pushed this to the point that we're now having all this public information vis-a-vis Epstein and his relations, financial and sexual and otherwise, that actually, in the end, Andrew might well never be held to account legally on that front. And yet, of course, we wouldn't know about any of these nefarious communications vis-a-vis public office and the misconduct in public office, were it not for the women who pushed this as far as they have, and of course including the late and, in my opinion, great Virginia Giuffre.
There's been plenty of reaction to the news that the King's brother has been arrested at the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. And the BBC has been speaking to experts throughout the day. One of those is Elsa Anderson, who was press secretary to Queen Elizabeth II between 2001 and 2013. She said she was shocked and astounded by what's happened.
A catastrophic end to such a glittering life of privilege and duty. Who could have predicted this? When this story broke in 2010, here we are 16 years down the line, which has ended in the most shocking way. I didn't foresee it. Well, I think the King acted incredibly promptly this morning, less than 2 hours after the police issued their statement. The King issued his own personal statement and talked about the full support. I found the language quite personal, but also quite distancing, by calling Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor by that name, not saying my brother. but the King made it very clear that the law must take its course in this matter. As I said, I was very surprised and impressed about the swiftness of this statement being issued. Normally, the monarchy obviously wants to get it right, but they're more sort of, I don't know, it's normally much more of a drawn-out process. This wasn't. And again, I was particularly struck by the fact that it was a personal statement because, of course, the one that was made previously was on behalf of Buckingham Palace, saying that they would cooperate with the police. This one was from the King himself.
Now, a reminder that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has previously denied wrongdoing in relation to Jeffrey Epstein and that he hasn't responded to the BBC's requests for comment on any of the specific allegations in relation to the release of millions of Epstein files in January. Well, the historian Andrew Loney, who is the author of Entitled, The Rise and Fall of the House of York, spoke to us earlier about the potential wider impact of this arrest on the country.
I do think that this will, I hope, lead to a parliamentary inquiry into Andrew's time as a trade envoy, because he didn't operate alone. He was enabled by a whole series of people, members of his staff, for example. And I think the former ambassadors in some of these countries, people who were involved in UKTI, I think should have something to say about how he operated so that we can ensure this doesn't happen again. And I do think this may lead to much more openness, I hope, from the royal family about particularly things like their finances, but more oversight, more parliamentary scrutiny, so that these scandals can't happen again.
Andrew Loney. There's been lots of comparison to historical events involving the royal family. Craig Prescott is an author and lecturer at the University of London. He said Andrew's arrest is more serious than when Edward VIII abdicated and went to live in exile.
I think this is entirely unprecedented in modern times. The only member of the royal family who has had contact with the police as such would be Princess Anne, who has an offence under the Dangerous Dogs Act. But this is of a very, very different gravity. Of course, this is much, much more serious than that. And in that sense, this is without modern precedent. You know, this is the most spectacular fall from grace for a member of the royal family in modern times. And you might say this is, you know, this is worse than Edward VIII, who, you know, fell from being king and sort of lived in exile. You know, like he still kept royal status. You know, he made a choice. But this is, you know, several degrees worse.
Robert Hazel is Professor of Government and the Constitution at the Constitution Unit at University College London. He was asked what the impact of all of this could be.
At one level, not a great deal, because he's an ordinary citizen like the rest of us, so he has the same rights and responsibilities under the law as any other citizen. But on another level, because he is the brother of the king and a member of the royal family, albeit no longer a working royal, clearly it has great political importance. Constitutionally, I'm not sure that it does. And the palace, I feel, so far has not put a foot wrong in terms of their response to this. The king put out a short statement, you will remember, about 10 days ago, in which he said that the palace stood ready to, in effect, assist the police and any other authorities with any of their inquiries. So there's no cover-up on the part of the palace. They're not trying to hide anything. And if there are any emails in the possession of the palace or any other royal household that might be relevant, they will be disclosed. And the king, in effect, reinforced that statement today when he put out the statement this morning saying the law must take its course.
More now on the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. The specifics of this investigation haven't been made public yet, but they follow a series of claims that he allegedly shared official documents with the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew, who turned 66 today, has previously denied any wrongdoing in relation to Epstein. The former policing commentator Danny Shaw has been giving us more details about what he is being investigated over and what this means for the police.
Misconduct in a public office, carries a maximum of life imprisonment on conviction. Of course, these are very early days in the investigation. But I think what is significant about this is that it shows just how seriously police are taking these complaints and concerns. There have been before investigations or inquiries into allegations concerning Andrew. Scotland Yard looked at that previously and decided that there was no sort of formal investigation. There was nothing that they could do to advance matters. But the release of the Epstein files has proved to be a game changer certainly in terms of police investigations. And we now know that there are a number of police forces carrying out scoping exercises or on the cusp of carrying out investigations. And it may well be that all of those will be brought together under some sort of umbrella body, perhaps the National Crime Agency at some stage. But Thames Valley Police has sort of made the early running in this, and this is a very significant development. But clearly for this step to be taken, police feel they have enough evidence at the moment to at least put some of the allegations to him to see what his response is. And at the same time, the arrest powers enable police to conduct searches. That's the other advantage, if you like, for the police of making an arrest, is that they can search premises, they can seize documents and other material and so on. They can't do that unless they have a warrant. An arrest of this type enables the police to do that, and that is clearly something that may help them in their inquiries.
Wendy Joseph KC is a former Old Bailey judge. She was asked how much evidence the authorities would need to make an arrest like this.
Well, in any case, before you can make an arrest, you must have reasonable grounds to suspect that this person has committed the offence for which they've been arrested. A statutory offence arises out of an Act of Parliament, and the words of the Act will define the actual offence. It's all set out there. It will have been considered and passed by Parliament and gone into law. It's very different from a common law offence, which will have grown up over a long period of time, and the law relating to it will have developed through previous case law. And so you go to previous cases from the higher courts of this country where they've dealt with such an offence to work out what are the elements of the offence. And it's not that easy to prove because there's quite a lot of different elements that need to be proved. There are four main elements. First of all, the accused has to be a public officer, someone in a public office. And here, no doubt, it will be said he was a trade envoy and that has that status. It may be that will be disputed, I don't know, but that will be the basis of it. Then secondly, while he is acting as a public officer, he must have what the law calls willfully misconducted himself. There's another way of committing it too, but the one here that is relevant here is willful misconduct by the supplying of information to Epstein. Willful just means deliberate misconduct. He must have known that what he was doing was wrong, or negligently, recklessly, not negligently, recklessly ignored the fact that it might be wrong. And his wrong conduct must amount to such that it is an abuse of the public trust in him. And of course, he must have no reasonable excuse or justification.
So what does all this mean for the royal family here in the UK and their place in society? Shortly after the arrest, King Charles issued a statement saying the law must take its course. The King said he'd learned the news with the deepest concern, and those carrying out the investigation would have the royal family's full and wholehearted support and cooperation. The BBC understands neither he nor Buckingham Palace were informed in advance of the arrest. The King stripped his brother of his royal titles last year over his association with Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor does, however, remain 8th in line to the throne. He is the first senior British royal in modern history to be arrested. Andrew has previously denied wrongdoing in relation to Epstein. Jack Royston is chief royal correspondent for Newsweek and host of the Royal Report podcast. She addressed the potential impact of today's events on the royal family.
To a certain extent, it might provide a little bit of a way out for the king of this scandal, because obviously the monarchy spent about 15 years trying to run away from it and hope it would go away. And it caused huge amounts of damage to the monarchy because of this perception that Andrew was not being prosecuted due to his status as a prince, his status as a royal family member. So if now we get to a point where, the police will have to run their investigation through to the end, they will then have to present material for the CPS and let the Crown Prosecution Service decide whether charges are justified. But if they are, and Andrew has his day in court, that could actually remove that big cloud over the monarchy, because the anger and sense of injustice within the public was always at the idea that if Andrew was a normal bloke like anybody else, he'd have been investigated and charged and so on, and he got away with it because he was a royal. So if they do now proceed with an investigation, and potentially it goes as far as court, and a jury gets to decide on this issue, that could actually finally remove this cloud over the monarchy, where it was felt that the royals were protecting Andrew. That was what was causing the damage and eating away at the palace's reputation. But yes, absolutely, they will have to make some really important decisions about what information to share with the police. And the police, if they still have the emails that were bouncing around royal servers, palace servers, back in 2010, 2011, then they will almost certainly have relevant material to share with the police.
Jack Royston from Newsweek. It's worth noting that the King's brother has not been arrested for anything surrounding Virginia Giuffre. What's led to him being arrested is information in the Epstein files around activities while he was a trade envoy. Katie Nicholl is the royal correspondent at Vanity Fair, and she's been speaking about the impact of the scandals surrounding the former Prince Andrew on the rest of the royal family.
It has been a problem for decades now. But I think there is a sense when you look at this statement that the King just couldn't keep silent. We weren't sure we were going to get a statement, but I think it's absolutely right that we have done. People want a response. I think when you consider the last reign and that of the late Queen Elizabeth, that famous mantra that the late Queen had, never complain, never explain, that simply doesn't wash here. That's simply not going to be enough for people. We're in a different era. We're in a different generation. The King's shown in many ways to be transparent, particularly with his recent health issues. But I think there needs to be greater transparency now around this. I suspect there is probably also a sense of relief on the King's part. I was told by sources close to the King, this felt like a pressure chamber, just waiting for this arrest to happen. They didn't know if it was going to happen. They've only just learnt of it, as we have as well. So I think there is a sense that perhaps this comes as a relief. And of course, it puts the King in a position where he actually can't say anything else. He can't make any further comment because, of course, this is a police investigation.
Let's take you to this live shot of Buckingham Palace tonight. Do stay with us here on BBC News, because we have a special programme for you coming up on the arrest of the former Prince Andrew with my colleague Maryam Moshiri at the Palace.
Well, not surprisingly, the former prince's arrest is headline news right around the world.
Andrzej Mountbatten-Windsor aresztowany.
Britische Prinz Andrew ist wegen mutmaßlichen Amtsmissbrauchs im Zusammenhang mit dem Sexualstraftäter Jeffrey Epstein.
L'arresto dell'ex principe Andrea.
Qui nous mène tout d'abord à Londres. Séisme pour la monarchie britannique.
Fox News Alert, we begin this hour with a breaking news story out of the UK.
Ex-Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the brother of the King, King Charles, has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office.
Well, our North America editor Sarah Smith is in Washington. And Sarah, it is striking that the release of the Epstein files has had far-reaching consequences here in the UK, far more so than in the United States. What's been the reaction there?
Well, the reaction has really intensified the calls for arrests to be made here as well, and for some of Epstein's co-conspirators to be brought to justice. And what politicians on both sides of the political divide are saying is if the British justice system can do this and a former prince can be arrested, then why on earth have similar actions not been taken here? Because after all, Jeffrey Epstein largely operated in America. Many of his victims were American. This is where most of his properties and networks and social connections were. And yet, as you say, nobody in America, apart from Epstein himself and his accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell, have been held criminally responsible for anything. Now, prosecutors have said there just is not enough information in the Epstein files to bring charges against anybody else in America. But you have lawmakers here who say they are absolutely determined to pursue justice for the victims in the United States. They're investigating Epstein's crimes and would very much like to speak to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor as part of their inquiries, but because they're here in the United States, they do not have the power to legally compel him to come and give evidence to them.
Live from Buckingham Palace, this is BBC News on the day the former Prince Andrew is arrested in a crisis which has rocked the royal family. Plainclothes police officers raided his home on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk first thing this morning, along with his former home in Windsor. The royal family had been given no prior warning.
I'm here at the Sandringham estate where Andrew currently lives. Today it is a hive of police activity.
The former prince is in police custody after being detained on suspicion of misconduct in public office.
Well, I'm near Royal Lodge in Windsor Great Park, where the former Prince Andrew lived for more than 20 years, and today we've seen uniformed officers within the property.
What's your reactions to your brother's arrest, sir? So, what's your reaction
A noisy
to your
reception
brother's
for
arrest?
King Charles meeting the public earlier. He expresses his deepest concern and says the police have his full and wholehearted support and cooperation. And the family of the Andrew accuser, Virginia Giuffre, commend the King for the actions he's taken. Welcome to this special programme across BBC News. I'm Maryam Moshiri. The former Prince Andrew is tonight in custody after he was arrested this morning on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Police in unmarked cars swooped on his new home on the Sandringham estate at about 8 o'clock this morning. The King had not been informed in advance. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, who turned 66 today, has been facing allegations that when he was a British trade envoy, he shared confidential documents with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Well, through our programme, we'll be live at Windsor Castle, Andrew's former home, and the Sandringham estate, his current home, where he was when he was arrested earlier today. We'll also bring you analysis from the BBC's team of correspondents around the world. Well, this is the moment the BBC broke the story to the world.
You're watching BBC News. I'm Lauren Taylor. We start with breaking news about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. The BBC understands that he has been arrested. Lucy Manning, who's the one who's been breaking the story. And Lucy, tell us what you know.
Good morning. Well, my understanding is that there has been a very significant development in the investigation into the Epstein files, and Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been arrested this morning on suspicion of misconduct in public life.
As we've heard, the former Prince Andrew has been facing allegations that he shared documents with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein when he was a British trade envoy. Well, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, as he is now known, is currently 8th in line to the British throne, although he was officially stripped of his prince title in November last year. When he was born, back in 1960, he was then second in the succession line. His brother, King Charles, has today released a statement saying, "I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and suspicion of misconduct in public office. What now follows is the full, fair and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. In this, as I have said before, they have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course. As this process continues, it would not be right for me to comment further on this matter. Meanwhile, my family and I continue in our duty and service to you all." Well, Andrew is the most senior royal to be arrested since Charles I more than 350 years ago. He's always denied any wrongdoing over his association with Epstein and has not responded to the BBC's requests for comment on the specific allegations in relation to the release of millions of Epstein files in January. Our first report is from our special correspondent, Lucy Manning, and the BBC journalist who exclusively broke the story of Andrew's arrest.
Unmarked police cars on a Norfolk country lane, signalling the moment Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was arrested. Around 8 a.m, police officers arrived to take the King's brother, the 8th in line to the throne, from the King's estate at Sandringham to police custody. The former prince arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office, held on his 66th birthday. The BBC broke the news of his arrest at 10 a.m.
We start with breaking news about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. The BBC understands that he has been arrested.
Followed shortly by a statement from Thames Valley Police confirming the development. It said, "We have today arrested a man in his 60s from Norfolk on suspicion of misconduct in public office and are carrying out searches at addresses in Berkshire and Norfolk. The man remains in police custody at this time." Just weeks ago, Andrew was waving to the public in Windsor Great Park and out riding. Now, the police at the gates here, near his former home at Royal Lodge, as well as searches at his current Sandringham home. Police questioning the former prince about allegations in the Epstein files that he shared official documents when he was a UK trade envoy, including with paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. The King carried on with his royal engagements, opening London Fashion Week. Despite this arrest that will have undoubtedly shaken the royal family.
What's your reaction to your brother's arrest, sir?
Even as they've tried to distance themselves from the former prince. The King wasn't told in advance of the arrest, and at midday he released a statement. Written, it seems, as a monarch rather than a brother, saying, "I have learned with the deepest concern the news about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Let me state clearly," he said, "the law must take its course. As this process continues, it would not be right for me to comment further on this matter. Meanwhile, my family and I will continue in our duty and service to you all." Signed, Charles R. Speaking before the arrest was announced, the Prime Minister said whether it was Andrew or anyone else involved, they should come forward with information.
One of the core principles in our system is that everybody is equal under the law and nobody is above the law. And it is really important that that is applied across the board.
Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor previously denied separate allegations he had sex in the early 2000s with then-teenager Virginia Giuffre, who took her own life last year. Her family praised his arrest, speaking to Newsnight.
We are hopeful that this investigation now starts to open up that further probe into the sexual assault allegations, into the child trafficking. So it still is a win.
The 66-year-old has always consistently denied any wrongdoing in relation to Epstein. He downplayed their relationship in his 2019 Newsnight interview.
It would be a considerable stretch to say that he was a very, very close friend, but he had the most extraordinary ability to bring extraordinary people together, and that's the bit that I remember.
As police officers remain at Windsor and Sandringham, these are of course only allegations at the moment. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor hasn't been charged with any offence, but this is an unprecedented arrest in modern royal history. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
Well, Lucy joins me now from the studio. And Lucy, a truly extraordinary morning, starting off with, of course, the news that you broke that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor had been arrested. Talk us through those events.
Well, for the last few days, we've obviously been concentrating on police investigations into the Epstein files, and obviously they involved the former Prince Andrew and others. And so this morning there were pictures of what appeared to be plainclothes police officers outside his house at the Sandringham estate, and the BBC were able to confirm that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor had been arrested. And shortly after that, Thames Valley Police did put out a statement to say a man in his 60s from the Norfolk area was now under arrest. And it's hard to sort of encapsulate what a significant moment this is in modern royal history, to have the King's brother, the eighth in line to the throne, now under arrest. We don't know exactly what has been happening through the rest of the day with the police. We understand he's been taken for questioning. We don't know exactly where, but there have been police searches at the home he was living in on the Sandringham estate and at his former home, the Royal Lodge at Windsor. There have been police there all through the day, and it is possible, we are hearing some reports that we're looking into at the moment, that the police may be releasing him this evening.
Lucy, thank you very much indeed for that. Lucy Manning there, our special correspondent. Well, here outside Buckingham Palace is our royal correspondent, Johnny Diamond, who is with me now. And Johnny, this obviously has huge repercussions for the royal family. How much damage could this potentially do to the institution of the monarchy?
I mean, I think the potential is enormous. I think at one end, a best option for them is that this is a breathing space, a line to be drawn between the royal family and Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, an indication that the King wants the investigation to go on entirely unhindered, that justice carries out in this country without fear or favour. That is a best option. The worst option is that this is a body blow for the House of Windsor. Despite the stripping of the titles, the removal from accommodation, this is still the King's brother. This is still the eighth in line to succession to the crown. This is someone who, as a senior member of the royal family, was working for his country, and that work is now under investigation and makes him the subject of an arrest. That is very difficult for the palace. The palace, I think, hopes that after the drama of today, the King's decision in stripping him of titles, stripping him of accommodation, of offering cooperation with an investigation, all those things will rebound on the King positively and rebound on the institution properly, that he has done the very best that he could do. The question remains whether people beyond, the palace and the people who know it well really make much of a separation between Andrew, the royal family, the monarchy, the palace, or whether they essentially damn the whole institution because of what they perceive Andrew to have done. And the second question, of course, is when that investigation happens, when there is wholehearted cooperation between the royal family and the police and any prosecuting authorities, what is found and what is revealed about what happened over the years and over the decades that have passed. So this is a moment of high challenge. The palace hopes, as I say, after the drama of today, the King's wisdom will be revealed. We'll wait and see what happens in the weeks and months to come.
And if you peel back all of this drama and all of this controversy, fundamentally this is a story about a family and a family in crisis.
Yeah, it's a story about a family. It's also a story about the great tension that always dominates the royal family. It's this tension between their public life and their private life, where you draw the line, what decisions you make about what you reveal, when you make those decisions as well. And now, as has happened before, but generally not with so much drama, now somebody else will be making those decisions about what is revealed. The offer of cooperation with an investigation is clearly a very serious one. The King's words were pretty weighty in the statement today, wholehearted cooperation. But it takes the sort of right of initiative away from the palace and puts it in the hands of other authorities, the legal authorities, the police. It's a significant challenge for an organisation that is not renowned for openness and transparency.
Johnny, thank you very much indeed. Well, it was back in November 2019 when the then Prince Andrew sat down here at Buckingham Palace for a television interview with my colleague Emily Maitlis for BBC Newsnight. He was hoping to address allegations and the controversy that had dogged him for years in the wake of his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. Instead of drawing a line under it all, his decision to give an interview to the BBC sparked many more questions. But few could have imagined how events would go on to unfold. With more, here's our UK correspondent Daniel Sanford.
Although today's arrest had nothing to do with Virginia Giuffre, this picture of her with Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell was where it all began. She said that she'd been forced by Jeffrey Epstein to have sex with Andrew and that this picture was proof.
He knows what happened. I know what happened. And there's only one of us telling the truth, and I know that's me.
Epstein had been jailed in 2008 for prostituting girls under the age of 18, though Virginia Giuffre was not part of that case. 2 years later, in 2010, Andrew was photographed meeting Epstein in New York and even filmed staying in the disgraced financier's home. In his infamous Newsnight interview, he said he'd gone there to break off contact with Epstein.
By mutual agreement during that walk in the park, we decided that we would part company, and I left, I think it was the next day. And to this day, I never had any contact with him from that day forward. The problem was the fact that once he had been convicted,
You stayed with him.
I stayed with him. And that's the bit that as it were, I kick myself for on a daily basis, because it was not something that was becoming of a member of the royal family.
The year after that 2010 meeting, Andrew stopped working as a trade envoy but continued his royal duties until 2019. And even though Epstein died in prison that year, Virginia Giuffre and his other victims continued to campaign for the truth to come out, starting what became a clamour for the release of the Department of Justice's Epstein files. The releases began last year, and when the biggest release of all came in January, the BBC found this apparent email exchange timed days before the pictures of Andrew's meeting with Epstein in New York. Andrew seems to receive some UK government reports from his visit to Asia, and within 5 minutes his account, the Duke, appears to forward the reports to Jeffrey Epstein, the man he said he was breaking off relations with. The day after the BBC report, Thames Valley Police said it was looking at whether to start an investigation into Andrew into misconduct in public office. He was forced to leave Royal Lodge and move to Norfolk.
You cannot believe that Andrew, surrounded by police, by civil servants, by government ministers, by other royals, for 30 years, 40 years he's known Epstein, that no one knew anything about anything that he was up to.
And so on his 66th birthday, the late Queen's much-loved son suffered his latest humiliation, being arrested on the Sandringham estate and taken into police custody while his homes were searched. Daniel Sandford, BBC News.
Well, King Charles and Queen Camilla both carried out official engagements as planned today. The King attended an event to mark the start of London Fashion Week. This was the moment he was asked by reporters whether he had any reaction to the arrest of his brother.
What's your reaction to your brother's arrest, sir? Sir, what's your reaction to your brother's arrest? Any reaction to your brother's arrest, sir?
Well, for more on what has been happening today, let's cross live to Windsor, where we can speak to our correspondent Helena Wilkinson, and also to Sandringham, where we can speak to our correspondent there, Noor Nanji. Helena, to you first. Talk me through the events of today in Windsor at the Royal Lodge.
Yeah, well, it's dark, as you can see now, but we arrived not long after the BBC confirmed that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor had been arrested on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. Thames Valley Police then put out a statement confirming that 2 addresses in Norfolk and 1 in Berkshire were being searched. When we arrived here, it's too dark to see behind. You can see the gate, but beyond that is Windsor Great Park, and just in the distance is another gate which leads to Royal Lodge. That's the property where Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor lived for more than 20 years. Up until about a fortnight ago, we saw a number of uniformed police officers, and then we had it confirmed that searches were being carried out at Royal Lodge, and those uniformed police officers were basically standing guard to secure the scene, even though members of the public obviously can't go beyond that gate. But we also saw a number of police officers in unmarked cars passing by here, going through the gate just behind me. What we don't know at this stage is whether the search here at Royal Lodge has been completed or not. We have asked Thames Valley Police whether it has been. They say they won't say anything yet beyond the statement that they put out this morning. So it may be that the search has been completed. It's a vast property, though, 30 bedrooms within the idyllic grounds of Windsor Great Park. So you would have thought it would take some time. But Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor did move out of here just over 2 weeks ago. We understood that he would be returning a number of times since he moved out of the property to collect the rest of his belongings. Whether he did that or not, we don't know. But a lot of activity here today with uniformed police officers here at Royal Lodge for that search.
Helena, thank you. We have some breaking news on this story. Let's go straight to Aylsham and speak to Matt Percy from BBC Look East. Matt, what's happened where you are?
Well, in the last 25 minutes, a large black Range Rover arrived here at Aylsham Police Investigation Centre. It tried to get in through one of the gates, but the gate was apparently broken. It reversed out into the road and went in via another gate. 5 minutes later, a large garage door attached to the Police Investigation Centre opened, and we could see 2 vehicles. The vehicle behind was this large black Range Rover, and it sped past us. A Reuters photographer took a picture of the windscreen of the Range Rover, and I have seen a picture of Prince Andrew apparently lying down on the back seat. The 2 vehicles went past us, as I said, to the bottom of the road and sped away from Aylsham.
Well, we're seeing a photograph now on the screen of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor in the back of a vehicle. His eyes have been lit red by the flashes of the camera that clearly has been trying to take a photo of him. He looks as if he's crouching a little bit down in his seat. He looks as if he doesn't really want to be photographed. His hands are clasped together and he looks like he has quite a surprised and uncomfortable look on his face, it has to be said. Just tell me a little bit more, if you can, Matt, about what exactly the circumstances were of this car coming past, and also, if you can, which direction the car was headed in.
Right, it's hard to say which direction it was headed in. All I would say is that it is a very cold and drizzly evening here outside the Aylsham Police Investigation Centre. When the car left this building, it did so at some considerable speed. The investigation centre is on a kind of industrial estate here in Aylsham, and it went down the road to the end of the industrial estate onto a main road where it took a right. And that right-hand turn is heading towards Aylsham, but it also connects onto another main road, so we don't really know where it's headed.
Let's take ourselves back to this morning, if we can, Matt, when we know that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was arrested by police. I wonder whether you can tell us a bit more about that car journey, specifically where that car headed towards direction-wise and the journey that that car took.
It's hard to say, but all I can tell you is that Aylsham is about 40 minutes drive from Sandringham, and it's a pretty direct route. It's a single road that will take you there through North Norfolk. And although it's not the closest police investigation centre to the Sandringham estate, it certainly isn't far.
OK, Matt, thank you very much indeed for that. And just to reiterate this breaking news, this is a photograph that we have been showing you on the screen. I'll describe it to you one more time. It's a photograph of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor in the back seat of a car. You can see a couple of people in front of him in the front seats. You can also see that he is crouched down very slightly. He has his fingers interlaced. The look on his face, it has to be said, is one of discomfort and surprise. He does not look like a particularly happy man. Perhaps, obviously, unsurprisingly, he has spent the entire day at a police station. And this picture was taken a very, very short time ago of him leaving a police station in the back of a car in Aylsham. So we are assuming, and one could never really assume, but we are assuming that he is on his way back to his residence in Sandringham. And that is where we can go live now and speak to our correspondent, Noor Nanji. Noor, just talk us through, if you can, what has been happening at Sandringham whilst Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been in that police station.
Yes, well, as you were just saying there, it appears that Andrew has now left police custody. We've seen that picture that appears to show him in the back of a car, so possibly heading back to where we are here. We are outside Andrew's home, Wood Farm, here on the Sandringham estate. It's just up the driveway behind me, about a quarter of a mile behind me. You can't see very much because it's very dark here, but there has been a sizable police presence, and there is a car pulling up right now, so we're just going to take a moment there. It's difficult to say. You couldn't see, obviously, what was inside the car, but clearly there has been a really sizable police presence and a media presence that's built up here over the day. We've been here from early on, and indeed photographers were here very early in the morning because it was, of course, Andrew's birthday, his 66th birthday, so people were hoping to get a picture of him then. Then, as we understand it, around 8 a.m, as we've been reporting, 6 cars believed to be police vehicles then pulled up here. They were inside for around 35 minutes, and then 3 cars went out. And one of the photographers we spoke to here said that they think they saw Andrew inside that car. Now, officially, we don't know where he was arrested. What we do know, he was then taken into custody. And as we've been saying all along, he's always denied any wrongdoing in relation to Jeffrey Epstein. And it is worth just saying that the Sandringham estate here, it is a favourite for the royal family. It's where they often spend, for example, Christmas Day. And over here, there is always often quite a loyal pro-monarchist sentiment here as well. But today, this rural estate, as you can see and you can hear around me, has become a hive of police activity. Noor,
thank you very much indeed. And just a reminder that Matt mentioned that a car driving from Aylsham, where that photograph was taken, back to Sandringham would take around about 40 minutes' time. So we're expecting potentially, if Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is on his way back to his residence, for him to arrive in about 30 to 35 minutes. But just to reiterate the breaking news that has come into us in the last few minutes, those of you who can see this, you are watching it on your screens. For those of you who can't, I will describe to you what we are seeing. This is a photograph that was taken of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor leaving the police station. He has left police custody and is in the back seat of a car. You can see the effects of the flashlight on his face and his eyes. He does not look particularly happy. His fingers are intertwined, his hands are in front of him, and he is slouched in his seat in a way that suggests perhaps he did not want to be photographed by the waiting press. So let's just take stock of what this means for the royal family in the UK and indeed their place in society. Let's cross live now and speak to Ailsa Anderson, a former press secretary to Queen Elizabeth II between 2001 and 2013. Ailsa, it's good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us. And just if I can get your reaction to everything that we've been hearing today and the impact you believe this will have on not only the royal family but also on Andrew.
Well, it has been the most extraordinary day I think I've ever experienced. And actually, I'm quite glad that I'm not working at Buckingham Palace today in the royal household. To see those images of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor returning back to the Sandringham estate after spending his 66th birthday being questioned by the police. Extraordinary. I mean, he looked dazed, he looked shell-shocked, he was slouching down. And it really, this image, I think, will just remind people of his extraordinary fall from grace today.
Talk me through exactly what you believe the impact will be on the royal family of these events. We know obviously it's too early to say where Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor will end up, what will happen to him, but already the damage has been done, and I guess from now on in it's a question of how much damage limitation can happen going forward.
Yes, absolutely. What I would say is that I was incredibly impressed by the swiftness of the royal household, in fact of the King himself, to issue that statement today at 12 noon, less than 2 hours after the police issued their statement. And it was a personal statement. I think it will resonate with people. He expressed his deep concern about the news, talked about the authorities having his full support. Again, and talked about, you know, the law must now take its course. So, again, as I said, it was a personal statement, unlike the statement that was released over a week ago, just saying they would cooperate fully with the authorities. I think it's absolutely...
Has the King, do you think... Oh, apologies, Ailsa, I wanted to ask you, because we're running out of time, has the King done things in a different way to the way in which his mother would have done them had she still been alive?
Well, of course, you know, what we knew in 2010 when this story first started to emerge is very different to what we know today. You know, more and more information has come out, more details. The 3 million extraordinary emails that Jeffrey Epstein has written to all sorts of people. So we are much more informed about what has gone on today than when the late Queen was around. So, you know, I commend His Majesty for the swiftness and the prompt actions he has taken to date.
But I also mean in the sense of the old never explain, never complain adage that one thinks about when one thinks of the royal family. Do you think that changed now? Do you think this is a different royal family that's understood the need to adapt itself to not only what is happening with this saga, but also society in general?
You know, it's a really good question. I just don't know the answer because, as I said, the late Queen, wasn't in possession of the facts that the King is today. So it's a very tricky question to answer. I just don't know because she only had half of the information or even less than that.
Ailsa, talk to me a little bit about what the impact you think all of this is having on the rest of the royal family. Of course, it's a close family. It's a family that normally spends so much time together. What do you think they are all feeling now? Would there be anger towards Andrew, or will there be any understanding?
I think they will feel bruised. I think they will feel shattered. I think, even today, the King, going to London Fashion Week to champion British retail, and that whole message has been completely lost in the furore of Andrew. And this is not going to go away. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, the next months to come. So this whole business has completely overshadowed the extraordinary work that the monarch and the rest of the royal family are doing, which is, clearly not going to go down well.
Ailsa, it's good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us on BBC News. Let's take a closer look at the relationship now between Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Jeffrey Epstein. Now, after meeting in the 1990s, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell attend a party at Windsor Castle, hosted by Queen Elizabeth II in the year 2000. In 2008, Epstein admits prostituting minors and is sentenced to 18 months in prison. 2 years later, Epstein is released from jail. Andrew is photographed with Epstein in New York Central Park. Andrew quits his role as UK trade envoy the following year. In 2015, Buckingham Palace denies Andrew has committed any impropriety after he's named in US court documents related to Epstein. Epstein is found dead in his jail cell on August the 10th, 2019, having killed himself after being charged with sex trafficking. In November of that year, in an interview with BBC Newsnight, Andrew says he had no recollection of ever meeting Virginia Giuffre and that he did not regret his relationship with Epstein. Well, last year, Buckingham Palace announces Andrew will stop using his titles and honours, and the King formally strips his brother of his Prince title and HRH style in November. Now that all brings us to 2026, when further photographs and emails were released as part of those Epstein files, revealing more about Andrew's contact with the sex offender. And now, today, Andrew is arrested. Well, the former prince's arrest is not related to previous allegations of sexual abuse related to Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking operation. Survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse have been reacting to these latest developments. Well, as we said, Jeffrey Epstein died in a New York prison cell on the 10th of August 2019 as he awaited, without the chance of bail, his trial on those sex trafficking charges. It came more than a decade after his conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor, for which he was registered as a sex offender. This time, though, he was accused of running a vast network of underage girls for sex. He pleaded not guilty. Well, Sky Roberts is the brother of the late Virginia Giuffre, who previously made allegations about the former Prince Andrew, which were settled out of court. She alleged that she was made to have sex with Andrew on a number of occasions, including on Epstein's private island, Little St. James, in the early 2000s. The settlement reached between the two made no admission of wrongdoing on Andrew's part. Well, Mr. Mountbatten-Windsor's arrest today is not related to those allegations, and he has consistently denied any wrongdoing. Mr. Roberts and his wife Amanda Roberts spoke to Paddy O'Connell from BBC Newsnight. He asked them whether it made any difference to them that Andrew's arrest is not about Virginia's central allegation.
Yes, I mean, it does make a difference, right? Because there's still this underlying issue of survivors not getting their day in court and not seeing judicial, legal action. However, we still are true in believing that it is the breadcrumb to the larger dinner. And so we are hopeful that this investigation now starts to open up that further probe into the sexual assault allegations, into the child trafficking. So it still is a win.
And what do you make of the words of His Majesty the King, that he reads with great concern of the arrest of Andrew, but he wants the law to be followed?
I will continue to commend the King for the actions that he's taken. We have yet to see that from our own government here. We were just at the Pam Bondi hearing. And so I think to hear the king come out and acknowledge the fact that there needs to be an investigation, the law should be followed, like it should be followed for anybody that should be held to this type of investigation. And if it is found that he indeed did share secret information from his own government, I mean, that's a crime that's punishable by life. We would ask that he holds him to the highest extent of the law, even though it is his brother. So I commend the king. I say thank you to the king and to the royal family for standing behind survivors, but also just standing behind their people to say, it doesn't matter your wealth or your power. You don't have a different set of laws for you that don't apply to other people. And I think we're seeing that in the UK right now.
Let's bring you some breaking news now coming into us from Thames Valley Police, and they have issued a statement to say that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been released this evening under investigation by Thames Valley Police. He has been released under investigation by Thames Valley Police. That basically indicates that there is still an active ongoing investigation into Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, but he has been released from custody without charge. So let's just take a little step back, if we can, and talk about what this all means, what exactly those original arrest charges mean. We've been talking about misconduct in public office. It's a pretty complicated offence. It essentially boils down to an allegation that someone who was doing a job on behalf of the British public did something seriously wrong, knowing it to be wrong. Well, to explain all of this a little bit more clearly, I hope is legal commentator Joshua Rosenberg, who joins me now. Joshua, before we move on and talk about the charge itself, can you just explain to viewers who may not understand, what does released under investigation mean? Because that's the latest line from Thames Valley Police.
It simply means that they no longer require to carry on questioning Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Presumably they've asked him to account for himself. We don't know what he said, but I'd be surprised if he gave very much in the way of answers. And the police now have to do the detailed work of going through the documents they may have access to, obtaining more evidence, assessing the evidence, ultimately deciding whether they think they've got a case, taking advice from the Crown Prosecution Service, and finally deciding whether to bring criminal charges. Now, all that is going to take quite a lot of time. There's absolutely no reason for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor to be in custody while all this goes on. It may take months, it may take a year or two. And in the meantime, he is released. It's not clear exactly whether this is released on police bail, as we used to call it, or simply released to await further questioning. But either way, he goes home, he waits to see what the police decide to do.
Let's talk a little bit now about misconduct in public office. Can you just explain to viewers and those who are following BBC News, what does that mean and why is it a common law offence?
It's a common law offence because it was developed by the judges over the centuries to deal with various types of misconduct for people who have an office under the Crown, a public office of some sort. It's been quite useful, but it is rather vague because it's been developed just by the judges as and when needed. The government has decided, taken advice from its law reform advisors at the Law Commission, it needs to be replaced with a statutory offence, an offence laid down by Parliament, and one is going through Parliament at the moment. But obviously that hasn't yet been passed and it wouldn't be retrospective. So what the prosecution would have to show is that Andrew was a public officer acting as such, and this presumably relates to his role as a trade envoy, who willfully neglected to perform his duty or willfully misconducted himself to such a degree as to amount to an abuse of the public's trust in the office holder without reasonable justification or excuse. And as you say, the question really boils down to this: did he misconduct himself while he was a trade envoy to such a degree as to be an abuse of the public's trust in him?
Joshua, thanks so much for that very, very clear explanation. I want to just hold on to you for a second. People who are with BBC News will be able to now see moving pictures of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor leaving Aylsham Police Station not long ago. You can see two dark cars. One looks like a Land Rover. driving away from the police station, turning away and driving up the road. A convoy of 2 cars. Their brake lights are coming on now. A very swift exit from Aylsham police station. We do know that during that exit, some photographs were taken of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor in the back seat of that car. And those are photographs that we have been showing here on BBC News. And as I mentioned earlier, Thames Valley Police have said that they have released a man under investigation. I just want to read you what we've heard from the police. On Thursday, the 19th of February, we arrested a man in his 60s from Norfolk on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The arrested man has now been released under investigation. We can also confirm that our searches in Norfolk have now concluded. That, of course, referring to the searches at Andrew's residence in Sandringham, which had been carrying on throughout the day, we believe, according to our correspondent, Noor Nanji. So as we continue to see this photograph of Andrew slouched and looking shell-shocked in the back of that Jeep, let's bring Joshua Rosenberg, our legal commentator, back in. Joshua, thank you very much for staying with us. We're seeing, though, Andrew in the back of a car, slouched, looking extremely uncomfortable, looking very tired and very shell-shocked. What would he have gone through today in custody?
He would have been invited to answer questions by detectives. He may well have had a lawyer with him at the police station. He would have been offered a duty lawyer, but perhaps he's got his own lawyers to come along and meet him at this police station. They would have given him advice, quite possibly advice to say very little, if anything at all. But of course, the police will continue to ask questions, even if they get a no-comment answer, because they want to see whether they can persuade somebody to make a comment, to answer a question which might be used in evidence against them. Now, this is not something that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has ever been through before. It's not surprising he's looking shell-shocked in that picture you've been showing. He seems to be keeping his head down in the hope of not being photographed. I mean, you know, one can speculate what's going through his mind as he is in this undignified position in the back of the car, undignified as somebody who's been arrested during the day. But the fact that the inquiries at his home in Norfolk have come to an end, the police have completed their search, means that there's no problem as far as they're concerned for him to return there. Obviously, they wouldn't have wanted him to return there while they were still looking through his possessions to see if there was any evidence that could be used against him. And obviously, his release from questioning in the police station seems to have been arranged to coincide with the end of the police investigations at his home.
Joshua, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Joshua Rosenberg there, giving us a very detailed analysis of what Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's day would have looked like today. Not the kind of day you want really to be spending on what is your 66th birthday. But this all began, as we have been reporting, at 8 o'clock this morning when police arrested Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor at his residence in Sandringham and took him to where we now know was Aylsham police station. And in the last 30 to 40 minutes, we have had those moving pictures and that still photo to show us that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor departed from Aylsham police station. You can see the 2 cars leaving now, including a Range Rover. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor trying very hard not to be photographed as the 2-car convoy left the police station, but one photographer did manage to capture him, and that photograph, I'm sure, will follow him around for many years to come. Andrew slouched in the back of a car, looking tired, exhausted, shell-shocked, and trying his best not to be photographed by photographers. Now, Thames Valley Police was able to provide an update to us in relation to this investigation, and I will read it to you. On Thursday, the 19th of February, we arrested a man in his 60s from Norfolk on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The arrested man has now been released under investigation. We can confirm that our searches in Norfolk have now concluded. So that is the very latest from the Thames Valley Police. And Our own reporter from BBC Look East, Mac Precy, was there as those Range Rovers sped past reporters, and he described the scene. He said, OK, these are live pictures, actually, we're going to take you to. We've taken you to live outside Sandringham. You can see there the lights of a car. We believe that we are seeing or about to see Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor returning back to his Sandringham residence. You can see the flashes of a few cameras as well happening. So as I mentioned earlier, at 18:50, at 10 minutes to 7 this evening, that two-car convoy departed from Aylsham Police Station on its way to Sandringham. And there we have the shot of the cars leaving. The right is the two-car convoy leaving from Aylsham, and on the left-hand side of the screen, for those of you who can see the screen, we can see the many, many flashes of the photographers as they try desperately to get another picture of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor as he returns back to his residence in Sandringham. It's been a long day for him. It's now nearly 10 to 8. He left Sandringham at about 8 o'clock this morning. That's the information we received from the police. It's been 12 hours since Andrew saw the inside of his house, and he spent the day in police custody. But police, in the last 10 or so minutes, released a statement confirming that the arrested man has been released under investigation. So these dual pictures of Andrew leaving and Andrew returning on your screen. Some of the people who work closest with the royal family are protection officers. You saw one of them in that photo of Andrew a little bit earlier. They are tasked with safeguarding them around the clock. Well, Di Davis is the former head of Royal Protection in charge of those officers and joins me now. Di, it's good to talk to you. A real insight into what happens within these situations. So we saw a picture of Andrew leaving Aylsham Police Station with who I assume are protection officers with him as well. Would they have accompanied him to police custody too?
No, is the simple answer, because he doesn't have royalty protection anymore. I believe his brother, the King, was still paying, or may have been paying, for protection, but those were not, as far as I know, royalty protection officers.
So who would they have been then, do we think?
They would have been private, either former police officers or soldiers who are now employed, I presume, to be security for the said prince or ex-prince. But they wouldn't have been royalty protection, as far as I know.
Sure, sure. Let's talk a little bit now about everything we've been hearing today about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. How much damage do you think this has done to the royal family?
Huge damage, in my humble opinion. We've never, as you've been told many times, had anything like this since Charles I. So this is a huge damage, and a huge question has to be asked. He is being investigated for misconduct in public office. It's time he was investigated for misconduct as a prince when he was. And it's surprising to me that we're looking at paper evidence of transactions rather than the evidence of victims. To me, female victims are far more important until we start to prove that he may have been traitorous. And that's the other allegation that should be investigated. And the big question to me, who else knew? Who aided and abetted him? So these are big questions for the palace and for society as a whole.
Would that be where you would take the investigation in terms of police perspective? I mean, if from a police perspective, what would you be examining?
Well, I would have gone back, as I did 6 years ago, to that original interview. I went on Newsnight and discussed it then and said if there was evidence, as there was, in my opinion, he should have been investigated under caution 6 years ago. And here we are, still talking about it, and the Metropolitan Police are still to actually investigate that, or the misconduct in office when he allegedly asked people to dig the dirt on Virginia Roberts. It is scandalous.
OK, Di, thank you very much indeed. And let's just remind ourselves that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has always denied wrongdoing in relation to Epstein. He has not responded to the BBC's request on specific allegations since the release of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein. Well, not surprisingly, the former prince's arrest is headline news around the world. Let's cross live now to Washington and our chief North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue. Gary, has there been reaction from the US president?
Just in the last few minutes, we've heard from the president. In fact, we've got his words, which I can relay to you. We don't have the actual audio of that yet, but he was on Air Force One on the way, returning from a trip, I think, to the south. And he was asked about Andrew, and I can say what he said was, I think it's very, very sad. He said it's a very sad to me when I see what's happening. He said when you see what's going on with his brother, obviously means King Charles, who's obviously coming here to our country very soon. There's a planned visit by King Charles to the United States. Fantastic man, the president said, the king. So I think it's a very sad thing. So the president expressing some sympathy for the king's position in all this, whilst also kind of reiterating his pleasure, actually, the fact that he believes the files, the Epstein files, that is, have exonerated him.
Well, that's one of the things that I think many people in the US are talking about the Epstein files and the fact that there hasn't been any perceived justice in the US yet. There's literally, apart from Ghislaine Maxwell, no one has been arrested on charges relating to the Epstein files, and yet here we have a former prince arrested in the UK.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of members of Congress actually today coming out, particularly Democrats, but not exclusively Democrats, coming out and saying, look, if this can happen in the UK, then why can't it happen here? Now, of course, the Congressional Committee here looking into Epstein is specifically looking into his sex trafficking activities, his activities as a convicted sex offender. And there's been all sorts of allegations, as we know, around Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor in connection with Epstein on that side of the story. Allegations which, of course, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has always strenuously denied. But they say this means, that the Democrats that is, that this increases the pressure on him to come here and just answer questions about his relationship with Epstein. And they're sort of pointing to the actions that have been taken in the UK as an example of what can be done, even though we're talking in the UK case about a completely different set of